Welcome back. We are excited for today's interview. AAfPE's podcast, Legal Luminaries, shines a spotlight on the insights, trends, and voices shaping the future of paralegal education and the legal profession. Legal Luminaries is designed to connect you with thought leaders, innovators, and trailblazers in the legal field. With me today is my co host and fellow paralegal educator, Kelly Radnathy. Our guests today are a panel of folks who will be discussing the Texas Legal Paraprofessional Program. Joining us are Texas Supreme Court Justice Brett Busby, Executive Director of the Texas Access to Justice Commission, April Faith Slaker, and Commission staff member and Texas paralegal, Dominga Titus. Welcome, everyone. Would you please share with us a bit about your background? And let's start with Justice Busby.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Christine and Kelly, for having us. We're excited about this project and delighted to be able to share some information with you about it and your listeners. So I'm Brett Busby. I've been on the Texas Supreme Court as a justice for about 5 years now. Before that, I served as a justice on the State Court of Appeals in Houston. And before that, I was an appellate lawyer in private practice in Houston. And I'm originally from Texas, but I had the privilege of serving as a law clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court after law school, which is where I met my wife, who was also a law clerk the same year, and then came back to Texas and have had my practice there. I did a lot of pro bono work when I was in private practice, and then when I went on the bench, I became involved with the Access to Justice Commission, which is how I got interested in the issues that have brought us to you today.
Well, fantastic. We look forward to hearing more. And April, how about you, your background?
Hi, everyone. I'm April Faith Slaker, the Executive Director of the Texas Access to Justice Commission. And I've done work in both policy and research arenas, all focusing on civil justice matters. So most recently, before this role, I worked to set up a right to counsel program on evictions cases in Detroit. And before that, I was a researcher at the Access to Justice Lab at Harvard Law School. And before that, I served in several different roles at the American Bar Association, again, all working on access to justice issues.
Thank you so much. And to my fellow paralegal, Dominga, if you could share your background as well.
Yes, so I'm actually a baby paralegal. I just got certificated in January of this year, so I'm new to the game, but I've wanted to be one since I was 17, just took a long time to get here. I did serve in the Air Force for a few years as a Korean linguist. I have worked as a legal assistant in mass torts, and I've been with the commission for 1.5 years now.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your service. All right, so let's get started here, and thank you all again for being guests today. Justice Busby, you were quoted in an August 6, 2024 press release about the Texas Legal Paraprofessional Program, and you said, and I quote, "It is unacceptable that 92% of low-income Texans are not being served by our legal profession. Their basic civil legal needs are real and serious. They include protection from domestic violence, denial of veterans' benefits, and access to housing and food. Despite the hard work of volunteer attorneys, legislative appropriations for legal aid, and the generosity of private donors, these unmet needs are growing. We must explore innovative structural changes like those in today's order if we are to close this gap and ensure that justice is not simply a privilege for those who can afford it, but a right guaranteed to all. The court is grateful to the commission, to the leaders, members, and staff of its working group, and to all the legal professionals who have dedicated themselves to addressing this problem thoughtfully and responsibly." What a wonderful quote. Our organization, AAfPE, has included access to justice sessions at our national conference in past years. So this is an area of interest for all of us as paralegal educators and to our listeners. And in the August 6, 2024 Supreme Court of Texas order, I think it's under 24-9050, and we'll include all of this information on our show notes below. It states in this order, for years, the court has made combating this justice gap a top priority. And it has become clear that we must think beyond traditional efforts, such as funding and volunteer work, and focus on reforms that will help bridge the justice gap with new providers. The order further states that the court, through its liaison to the Texas Access to Justice Commission, Justice Busby, sent a letter on October 24th in 2022 requesting that the commission examine existing rules and propose modifications. So this question is to you, Justice Busby. Could you share more about your observations about what prompted that letter to the court, from the court to the Texas Access to Justice Commission? And then we'll follow that up with a question to April.
Sure. Well, thanks, Christine. It's the whole court is really united in Texas in being sure that we advance access to justice for those who can't afford traditional legal representation, and has been for decades. We all work together to go to Congress and to the state legislatures to ask for additional appropriations for civil legal aid funding. And we encourage the bar, members of the bar, to donate their time pro bono to help out folks who can't afford legal representation. And those have been the traditional tools in this area. But we've seen this percentage of low-income people all across the country, not just in Texas, rising, whose basic civil legal needs are not being met, just continuing to rise over the decades. So, and it's really just a problem of supply and demand. You know, we have we require lawyers to have a license to practice law in the states in this country, and that's required by the Supreme Courts or by the legislature. And there are reasons for that. We want people who are qualified, and we want people who are ethical, providing advice on legal matters to people who may not know whether they're getting good advice otherwise because they don't have the training. So there are reasons for the licensing requirements, but it artificially limits the supply of legal services that's out there. And what that means is that the cost goes up and the demand is not being fully met. It's just basic economics. And so we have to figure out another way to try to help address this problem. And so we've looked at this solution, among others, as one that the medical profession, for example, has pursued with physician assistants and nurse practitioners able to provide limited services. And of course, it's been tried in other states. And so our court saw that and asked that I send a letter to the Access to Justice Commission to bring a group of stakeholders together and create a working group to study this issue and see if it would be right for Texas.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for that background. And now we'll ask April this question. As the executive director of the Texas Access to Justice Commission, what was the response from your commission following that letter from Justice Busby in the court on behalf of the court and the events that followed that?
Yeah, so the commission received this letter and got to work immediately and formed the Access to Legal Services Working Group. And this brought together 27 members who were selected to ensure a broad range of experiences and perspectives to study this problem, and also contracted with the National Center for State Courts to provide support for the project. And then CSC has substantive expertise on nationwide regulatory reform efforts, so they were extremely helpful in this process. The group formed subcommittees to focus on specific aspects of the court's charge. So one committee was the Scope of Practice subcommittee, which analyzed the provisions and the scope of limited legal services that could be provided by qualified paraprofessionals. And then another subcommittee was the Paraprofessional Licensing Subcommittee, which studied the content and structure of the proposed rules that would be necessary to permit paraprofessional licensing and regulation. And so these committees met many times between, when getting the order or the letter from the court and around December 2023 is when the work concluded. Throughout that time, a number of people were brought in to help out. A number of people served on those subcommittees. Stakeholder feedback was also obtained from folks in the access to justice arena all over the state. It involved an online survey, focus groups, direct outreach to members of the State Bar of Texas, and did include feedback from paralegals as well. The commission also considered recommendations from various national organizations, so including the Conference of Chief Justices, the American Bar Association, and the Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal System, which is located at the University of Denver. They've done a lot of work on this in this area as well. We brought in guest speakers. So really did a thorough process understanding how this has been addressed in other jurisdictions and how it might work here in Texas. And all of that culminated in a report that created its recommendations for the court. And that was, a long process, but a thorough process that led to the recommendations that then led to the Supreme Court's order.
Wow, what an absolute undertaking and truly collaborative effort. I mean, thank you for sharing that, April, and the background on that. We understand from the court's order that there's a public comment period too, which I'm assuming, adds to the longevity of, hurdles to endure during this process. But we understand that there's this new and amended rules until November 1st of 2024, followed by another order by the court after the comment period closes. The court anticipates that the new and amended rules will take effect on December 1st. So that said, in noting the eligibility requirements, under Section 2 of that proposed rule, which is within the Texas State Bar Rules licensed legal professionals, the subparagraph D specifically includes certified paralegals through TBLS, NALA, NIFPA, or paralegal training. Could you give some background onto why and how they were able to identify these specific pathways that are creating qualified applicants for this program?
Sure, that's a great question. And some of the subcommittees that April mentioned, we did have a licensing subcommittee that included paralegals, paralegal educators, folks who are involved. We have a board certification for paralegals in Texas, as well as the national organizations that you mentioned. We included some members from NALA and NIFPA in Texas to get their thoughts. And really the idea here was to have a broad range of education and experience qualifications that would allow people to then come and sit for an exam. Because we want people to have some background in working in the legal services arena and some experience and training there. But we didn't want to make the requirements so high that it would be difficult for people to qualify for. And so we tried to cast a wide net to get experienced paralegals who have worked in the system for a while or who are certified. And then once you can pass that experience requirement or certification requirement, there's a further requirement then to take an exam in the particular subject area in which you'd like to be licensed. And so that was part of the thinking, was just in terms of this experience and credentialing requirement, which is sort of the first hurdle, that we wanted people to have some experience and training that would help them be able to understand interacting with people and talking with them about their legal needs, but also not make it so high that we wouldn't get a lot of people who were interested in participating. And Dominga, as a newly licensed paralegal, we'd love to get your thoughts on these eligibility requirements as well. We're not hearing you, Dominga.
Not only the formal certification through those organizations, NALA, NIFPA, and the TBLS, but also that y'all give value to the substantial work experience. This inclusivity really ensures that those who have the significant skills from their experience can contribute to the program. I think what excites me the most about these requirements is that it'll enable us to be licensed to provide the limited legal services to our low-income clients. Of course, that's those clients who are at or below the 200% of the federal poverty level. And that's where I see the real impact. And then by incorporating these qualifications, the program will help maintain the integrity of the profession while expanding access to justice to those who need it the most. And I know that personally, right now, I'm actively working toward meeting the requirements, and I plan to be among the first to obtain this licensure. I really see an incredible opportunity to further my career, but contribute directly to closing that justice gap. And I'm excited about the impact that this will have on our underserved communities here in Texas.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Dominga. And especially with October here coming up, is the American Bar Association will celebrate Pro Bono Week. towards the end of October. So really, those valuable contributions by paralegals and various legal professionals to close that access to justice gap. That is exciting. Thank you for sharing that. We also noticed, and I think Justice Busby had referenced this earlier under Section 3B, that the subject matters for licensure include family law, estate planning, probate law, and consumer debt law. Could you all share some insight on how these areas were selected?
Yeah, I'll start on that. There's also one other area that a paralegal with any license or what we're calling court access assistants can help with, which is a lesser level of certification, and that's landlord-tenant matters, which come up in our Justice of the Peace courts, which is a non-record court. And so, if there's something that goes wrong in that process, you can appeal to a record court where there are more requirements about preserving arguments and things like that. And so the working group had a higher comfort level with allowing a broader scope of practice for paraprofessionals and for these court access assistants who will be working with legal aid organizations primarily to be able to provide more representation in the justice courts. But the way that we identified these areas were just getting data from the courts themselves on where do they see the most self-represented litigants showing up who don't have a lawyer. And those were the areas: family law, estate planning and probate, consumer debt, usually under $20,000 of debt, and then landlord-tenant cases. So it's the area where people need the most help.
So, which is really fascinating when we look at that across the board, right? Of how many communities are at need of these critical resources. So, as Christine mentioned earlier, AAfPE hosted a session at a previous national conference, which included the topics of access to justice, and our outreach committee through AAfPE has been monitoring these developments in these legal practitioner programs, limited scope practice programs, similar to the Texas Legal Paraprofessional Program. Our featured guest speaker for the Access to Justice session at that conference was Michael Holberg, who is the director of special projects for the University of Denver's ILES, which I believe April touched on briefly earlier, which is the Institute for Advancement of the American Legal System, which is housed out of the University of Denver's Law School, and specifically their Allied Legal Professionals program. So with more states developing these programs, Justice Busby, in your observations within the state of Texas and the development of similar programs across the country, we're curious to hear what your thoughts are in having maybe an information clearinghouse, something like ILES, to really share the best practices and lessons learned and maybe strategies for collaboration forward.
Yeah, I think it's critical, and ILES was very helpful, Michael and others, to us, providing information about what different states were doing. And really everybody we've called on who has looked at this issue has been so willing to share their time and expertise. And as April mentioned, people came in person, people came on Zoom to testify and answer questions at working group meetings and subcommittee meetings. Just to share expertise on the nuts and bolts of what was working well, what other things might be tried, different things in different states. We had court administrators, we had access to justice folks, we had judiciary folks who would come and share expertise from some of the states where they're already doing this, especially Arizona and Utah. I want to thank their justices and staff and all the folks that have worked on the programs in those states, and the folks at the Rody Center at Stanford, including Lucy Rica, who've been very helpful on this issue, and so many others that have studied it and already put a lot of time and effort into it and seen what works well. We learned some from the experience in Washington State, where they had much higher qualification requirements and didn't get so many people signing up for the program as well. And so that was useful to get that information. So we really benefit from the experience of those who've come before us and started taking a look at this issue. And we'll continue to pay that forward. Two of our leaders of our working group are going to be joining a call with some people from New York State in the coming weeks, which is looking at this issue to share some of what we learned along the way. And April, you may have other thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, for us, the work still isn't over. So there's a whole implementation phase going forward. And I think we'll probably continue to look to the information from other states and a clearinghouse such as this to learn what has worked elsewhere and what we might incorporate here.
Yeah, and that's such an important point, because our state bar has stepped up and said that they're willing to take on the regulatory and examination and other aspects of this. And our Board of Law Examiners has said that they're willing to help with that as well. And so, we have the rules, but there's a whole series of processes and exams and all of that needs to go on to actually make this happen once we get comments in and finalize the rules and make any changes that based on the comments that people send us. And so that is a significant undertaking. I noticed in one of the charts that ILS has that tracks what the states are doing on this. Some of them say approved and under development, and so that development part is, there's a whole infrastructure that needs to happen to support this, and we're grateful to our state bar for being willing to take that on.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and your thoughts around that issue. So, we have been, as AAfPE, have been very involved with ILS and also collaborating and sharing information. So given everyone's involvement in the development of the Texas Legal Paraprofessional Program, and it's been, from what I understand, a 2-year process to get this done, is there anything specifically that any of you think that as paralegal education programs, directors, adjunct faculty, the educators, what can we do to better prepare paralegals and these paraprofessionals for these types of roles? And I think I actually want to start with Dominga, because she expressed that she's going to be one of the first in the cohort of Texas legal paraprofessionals. Just from your, thought, especially as you call yourself a baby paralegal, I love that. What are some of the things that you think as a newly minted Texas certified paralegal, as paralegal educators, Kelly and myself, what can we do to help our students to prepare?
I think the big thing is communication. Communicate about the availability of the program. Communicate what the requirements look like so that we can start to plan our careers, where we're going to go, our next steps. I know for me personally, I'm seeking certification through an FPA after seeing the court order. So just having that communicated to me that this is going on, I'm now preparing and planning for the implementation of it. So communication. If y'all could communicate about this program and the requirements and just spread the awareness of it, that would be really helpful.
That's a fantastic answer, Dominga. I love that. Just letting people know that it even exists as a pathway for your career. And I think next I want to throw this over to April and just get your thoughts, especially with your background with Harvard. What are your thoughts about this education? Because we have this existing, right, paralegal training. And this is the right forum to talk to folks that are listening, right, that are paralegal educators. But what are your thoughts with regard to the specific education for these Texas legal paraprofessionals?
Well, I guess I'm just going to echo what Dominga said, that the biggest first hurdle is just communicating about what this is and educating everyone on what it is, why it matters, and how to go about doing this.
And fantastic. And then Justice Busby, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, another thing that will be useful as well is there will be an exam that will be required for these various subject areas. And so once we get a sense of, what that exam is going to be like, obviously people will need to study and prepare for that. So there are, I'm sure that the people who are taking those exams would love to have some resources and education that can help them prepare for those exams. And, we'll be rolling out more information about what those look like in the coming months. So that would be a huge opportunity for paralegal educators to support this program and help people actually get licensed and start getting out in the field and providing these services to Texans who really desperately need them. And then there will be continuing professional education requirements as well. And so that's another opportunity to help people keep their skills current in those fields once they're licensed, so that they're providing the best advice to their clients.
I love that. looking at it as a way to expand what this profession has the capability to do, right? For so long, we had some restrictions on where we could apply our knowledge and our skill sets that we'd, garnered over the course of our either educational experience or practical experience.
Right.
So I love that. It's truly true. You don't know what you don't know, right? Without knowing that there's a pathway for this and understanding what resources would be available to support you through that pathway, why would anybody take the choice to go down that path if you don't know what exists down there? So I think you all hit the nail on the head with this. We have to talk about it. We have to share this and what this resource is and what the future of this profession looks like as far as opportunities for so many different individuals. And so I really like that, kind of winding down our conversation. The factor of inclusivity really stands out here, both from the perspective of how we're helping those in need within the community, right? We've become more inclusive by opening the doors this way, but we've also become more inclusive by those we're also now inviting into this profession. And that is where I think that access to justice wheel starts turning a lot more smoothly and actually makes the impact that much more, I guess maybe the momentum behind the impact is so much stronger. So with that in mind, do any of you have any final thoughts on the topic of, this tie-in and the interweaving of this access to justice and these legal, paraprofessional, or limited scope practice programs? Dominga, I'd like to start with you too, because I like to hear that baby paralegal idea, because it's so fresh and new, and it's really important for us to hear that perspective. Oop, I think you're on mute.
I think just grasping that excitement, if you could bottle it up and just spread it, it would really help with this type of program. And I'm looking forward to see how this helps the underserved community. It's working at the commission, I've seen a lot more of where the gaps are and where we have to fill in the holes. And this will definitely make an impact on that. And I'm excited to see more people getting justice and more people accessing it.
Wow. Yes, I love that. Identifying the gaps, right? And then finding ways to fill those gaps, which has got to be really empowering and exciting for those newer to the profession, that they're making such an impact so early in their career. Because for some of us, it's taken a really long time to feel the fulfillment from that impact, right? So April, how about you? What do you have do you have any final thoughts as far as that tie-in with access to justice and these programs that are coming about?
Yeah, I mean, back to something Justice Busby said at the very beginning, the problem is really just so big, the access to justice problem. There's a lot of statistics out there that suggest things like 90% of people with civil justice problems don't get the help that they need. So the more people we can include in the solution to the problem, the better.
Absolutely agree. And Justice Busby, do you have any final thoughts on this sort of interconnection here?
Sure. I think one of the things that you were talking about with Dominga is really important that paralegal educators can do as well, is point out to folks who are interested in this, where are the gaps? If family law is something that you're interested in, what could working as a licensed paraprofessional in family law look like? What are the different models? Would you want to associate yourself with a firm? Would you want to do it with legal aid? Would you want to be on your own, or maybe with a group of other licensed paraprofessionals? There are different models of ways that this could work, and I think just providing some ideas and guidance and assistance in helping people who want to do this and who are able to get licensed, then figure out, okay, so how do I make this actually work as a profession with this new license? I think having some ideas and a network out there of people that could be consulted for help and thoughts about that would be really helpful. And then also, if you're in a state that is not yet looking at this, I would encourage everybody who's listening to reach out to their court, their state bar, their Access to Justice Commission, and talk to people about this idea and say, look, this is something that a lot of other states are looking at and a lot of other states have done successfully. So The problem is just as big in your state, I can assure you, because the statistics are national on this, that the Legal Services Corporation collects about that justice gap. So Texas is big, but it's not any bigger. Huge, really. We call it the access to justice chasm here when you're over 90%, but it's just as big in other states. And so for those of you who are in a state that don't yet have a program like this, you can help have an impact on this issue by bringing it to the attention of folks in those areas that I mentioned, and see if they might want to put together a working group to study this issue like we did. And we'd be happy to be a resource for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Justice Busby, for shedding light on the access to justice issues and the Texas Legal Paraprofessional Program. April Dominga, thank you also for joining us today and for shedding light on your thoughts and perspectives on the development and the future of these paraprofessional programs. To our listeners, we really appreciate you joining us on this episode of AAfPE's Legal Luminaries. We hope that our conversation has sparked some contemplation on the impact of access to justice crisis happening around and across our country, as well as the innovative solutions that these legal luminaries are pulling together. For those eager to explore further, we've included relevant links in the show notes. A special acknowledgement to Doug Lusk and the National Society for Legal Technology for their invaluable contributions to the post-production of this podcast. As we wrap this up, we would like to leave you with a thought-provoking question. If you had 20 minutes to interview anybody, who would you choose to speak with? And we encourage you to share your thoughts and suggestions with us, because who knows, maybe we can have them on the podcast. So thank you once again, and we look forward to having you with us on the next episode of AAfPE's Legal Luminaries. Until then, keep forging those connections that illuminate the legal landscape. Goodbye for now.